Thanks for coming along to this afternoon session entitled How Big Food is Responding to Regenerative Agriculture. My name is John Parker. I'm not Sue Pritchard, as you might have guessed. Unfortunately, Sue has had a close family bereavement and couldn't make it, so I was asked to step in as Sue couldn't be here. So, firstly, just to introduce the panel, and I'll let them introduce themselves as we work through the questions that we've got this afternoon through the session. We've got Peter Kennedy at the end from Marks and Spencer. We've got Neville Graham from Dale Farm Dairy Cooperative and Andrew Clarke from Foyle Food Group. Just to kick off, and in relation to the subject, then Food Farming and Countryside Commission, I'm Director for Wales. John Woods is with us in the middle of the room, who's one of the partners who've pulled together the event today. In terms of big food and some of the work that we're undertaking at Food Farming and Countryside Commission, just to frame some of that work in terms of the topic, then two things. We're undertaking a UK-wide food conversation, so we're involving citizens across the UK, and John has just launched and been involved with the first of the Northern Ireland workshops on this. But we're involving citizens in a food conversation to ask citizens what they really want from the food system. What do citizens really think about the food system, what they eat, how it affects them, how it affects health, and the nature and climate crisis also. So that's something that we're undertaking at the moment. Please do look at our website for information on that. There have been a number of sessions across the UK so far, and what we're finding is really interesting in terms of citizen sentiments towards the food system. There have been some thoughts around nanny statism, that citizens don't want nanny statism by government in terms of what we eat. When actually, we found through our conversations and deliberations with citizens that they actually do in some respects. They do want some guardrails, and they do want certain regulations around the food system that support better outcomes in terms of nutrition, health, access to affordable, nutritious, healthy food. The second area, and this really speaks to the topic of big food, is the work that we've done on the Hope Farm statement. So back in May, in the build-up to the election, then we were curating and coordinating along with Paul Pullman, the ex-Unilever chief executive, a group of businesses, a group of interested parties, NGOs and others, around 6 recommendations that we'd like to put forward to the incoming government, whoever that would have been at the time. So those were around legally binding targets and policy coherence, funding that supports public and private funding for agricultural transition, public procurement and how we build frameworks around public procurement for food in our public settings, a multifunctional land use framework, fair and consistent standards, and measurement and disclosure of activity by private businesses in the sector for accountability. So again, please do look at the Hope Farm statement and how we've tried to interact with big business and some of the signatories to that include Nestle, that include Bid Food, Arla UK, and others. So that's some of the work that we've done in terms of big food at Food Farming and Countryside Commission. So now I'd like to go over to my panelists here and to open a question for the panel on regenerative ag and its building momentum. For those who see Clarkson's Farm, Andy Cato, hugely increasing popularity and visibility of regenerative agriculture in that programme. So Peter, if I can start with you, how is M&S responding to the increasing interest of regenerative agriculture?
Yeah. Well, hello everyone. My name's Peter Kennedy. I'm from M&S. I'll give a bit of an overview in terms of from an M&S point of view, just before we jump in and then jump to it from a regen and from a sustainability perspective. But look, from an M&S perspective, I'll give you a couple of facts, snapshots from an M&S perspective in Northern Ireland. Been here for about 57 years. We've got 22 stores. We're doing a lot of work at the minute in store about trying to communicate to customers more effectively, make a bit of a theatre experience of it. So if you go down to Lisburn, etc., there's 2 stores in Northern Ireland that have a bit of a, you could say, a facelift in terms of trying to make it more interactive for kids and helping that experience in terms of shopping. So there's that store program rolling out. You're going to see that across all stores in time. And we employ about 2,500 people in Northern Ireland in the stores. But Northern Ireland as a place and across the Ireland, in relation to food supply is really important. So we've got 11 main suppliers in Northern Ireland. If you look at eggs, we've got about 70% of our eggs sold across the UK from Skye. Ready Egg, big massive egg supplier. We've got Linden in Northern Ireland, which do probably a big percentage of our beef. We've got all our milk in Northern Ireland, just up the road in terms of 4 different suppliers. And we're trying to do more and more with individual suppliers and individual farms and trying to, where you can then talk about the activity on farm and what's happening. We have about just over 1,900 farms supplying in Northern Ireland that are, we call M&S Select Farms, which means that we engage with the farm, they've had an audit, and then they supply, whether it's into our fresh or into our ingredient business. And then we've got about 8,500 farms across the UK that supply into us. We've done a fair bit of work on trying to tell the farmer story into, and probably a good farmer story into customers. So we've got Tom Kerridge, which a lot of you will know from a TV chef perspective. I brought him on, and he has done a lot of TV ads, done farm to food hall. We've done it now about 3 years, trying to tell a story about the farm and actually where the food comes from. So you got David Irwin up the road in Ballyrashane. He was on this year talking about milk and all the different practices he was doing on farm. It is top line, it is customer friendly. And I think we'll get into a conversation on how do you communicate this story to customers and how do you make it easy for them to understand. And I think whenever we get into sustainability practices, regen practices, etc., it's not easy. And look, if we went around the tent here at the minute and asked everyone's definition of sustainability or regen, we're going to get variations. You then go to customers, touching on the question in terms of regen, what does it mean? We go to our customer base and we've asked different questionnaires out there. Look, some wacky ideas and some massively wide range. And even do customers know where their food comes from now, and do they know what good practice is? And actually, whether it's sustainability or whether it's high welfare. High welfare, you know, if you go into eggs and everything, you claim free range. You go into pigs and whether you want to claim outdoor bred or free farming. You know, they're all free farming's a more hard one for customers, but like free range eggs, everyone thinks they understand it. They probably think it's 10 birds in the back of someone's house in a shed, you know, but people have an idea of what they think that is, and customers jump onto that. And I think whenever you get into sustainability regen, it's a lot more difficult. Whenever you get into things like, and I think in this space, things like greenwashing, I think actually even for a business like ourselves, we've seen other companies jump on to have carried out different activity, and then there's been big backlash, etc. And to be fair, in some cases probably deserve backlash, but I think that the rule set around this area is work in progress, to say the least. And I think that as a big corporate, people do, I would like to think, definitely trust the brand, and brand recognition is high within M&S and customer base. And we're definitely, I think as a business probably, we're a bit too slow, we're a bit conservative in what we do and how we run as a business. But that process about doing something different, we probably are. We don't want to have that reputation of being accused of greenwashing, etc., and that come back. So I think that does affect some of the comms that we do. as a business, and also what we're doing. I'm jumping around different bits here, but I think it's just a bit of a snapshot from M&S. But look, if you go into customers and you ask the question, you know, what is important to you, and a customer, if you picked up a basket and what's important to you, no one will say value or price, and then you look at their basket and what they've actually bought is probably price sensitive. But whenever you do ask the questions like sustainability, is that important to you? And I'll probably stick, that was the question on sustainability. And on the age demographic, people under 25, sustainability was right up there in terms of, it was number 4. Animal welfare nearly always comes out number 1. But from under 25 to under 26, it was sustainability was really high. Then you go over to over 55s. It wasn't even in the top 15 things. So I think, you know, the age demographic, what is important to customers definitely varies around the age. And I'm sure the affluence of those shoppers, look, from an M&S, we definitely over-index and probably people over 55 as opposed to under 26. But in terms of what was important, that's the information that came back. You jump back in terms of what are we doing as M&S, look, doing the right thing is really important, and there's a lot of bandaging regen sustainability up into one thing and saying, look, this is what you should be doing and this is how we communicate it is really difficult. But what we're trying to do is we've got an innovation fund, $500,000 in terms of in our supply base. We've got a Farm for the Future programme working with across all our different species across the UK, and actually we've got working with farms, working with Harper Adams, working with different specialists out there, and then doing activity on farm and having open days and rolling that across our supply chain is what we're trying to do. Whether it's regen principles or sustainability principles, to embed them into our farms and then roll it out. But that's a whistle-stop tour from an M&S. I've sort of splattergunned in terms of different things out there. I'm very much happy to open it up.
Yeah, I'm sure we have some questions for you on lots of that as we move towards the end. Neville, in terms of Dale Farm.
Yeah, just to introduce myself. Yes, Neville Graham. I'm Head of Farmer Services with Dale Farm. Just to give you, those in the audience, a bit of a flavour as to who Dale Farm are and what we are. So we are a dairy cooperative. We're largely based here in Northern Ireland, but we do have farmers in GB also. We are actually the largest UK-owned dairy cooperative, owned by dairy farmers. We have 1,240 farmers supplying us here in Northern Ireland. Our farms would be regarded as average size farms. So the average farm is just over 100 cows. Our average farmer's farming about 200 acres of land. The majority of those farmers are working with grassland, permanent grassland, with some arable crops on the side, but the majority of the land is down to permanent pasture. The journey that we have been on in numerous years, because we're a cooperative, we're all about trying to improve our farmers' lot, because the farmers actually own the business. So we're always looking for ideas and things that we can implement through the company with our farmers that's going to improve their performance and efficiency. And now the language has changed to sustainability. So in-house we have our own farmer services, so we supply and install bulk tanks. We help our farmers with servicing and installing milking parlours, energy saving devices on farms, plate coolers, heat exchangers, water heating systems. We have a suite of staff who look after our milk recording side of the business, which also helps our farmers in terms of getting real information and real data back to farm to help them make decisions. And in recent years, we've gone a stage further, and we've introduced to our farmers, in conjunction with other companies, the ability to benchmark their businesses. So we're looking at feed efficiency, and we're working with Kingshay, who are based down in the southwest of England, on that project. And then following on from that, then we launched about 4 years ago a soil sampling program within the cooperative. We have trained staff that we have put through training, and they're now FACTS qualified to give fertiliser advice. And we're ramping that up in terms of getting guys real information back on the farm to make real decisions. That has now dovetailed together to come into a sustainability package for our farmers. And I suppose having Peter sitting on my right, we supply some products to Marks and Spencer's. We work with all the major multiples retailers. We supply products, ingredients to other businesses and to food service as well. And right across those categories, all of those businesses are now asking the question. They want to know more about the farms that the milk is produced from. Before it was just about, supply, being able to get delivery on time and price, but now it's about really getting into the depth of what's going on our supplying farms and looking at that. And that's where we are today. Regenerative farming, in terms of the term regenerative farming, it dovetails into sustainability. So a lot of the things that our farmers are doing, because of the size and scale of the farms and the fact that they're working with permanent pasture in a lot of cases, actually ticks a number of boxes with regards to regenerative farming. It doesn't go to the extremes, but we're on that page, and it is part of our sustainability package going forward.
Great, thanks. And over to Andrew, moving from dairy to a predominantly beef-based business.
Yeah, so thank you. So my name is Andrew Clarke, so I'm an agriculture manager for Foyle Food Group. So for those of you who don't know who Foyle Food Group are, so we're a red meat processor, solely slaughtering cattle and processing cattle for the retail sector, food service and butchery markets. Major customers include Tesco, Little Aldi, supplying red meat products right across the world. But in terms of Foyle and my role within agriculture, and just to give you a wee flavour of our scale, so Foyle Food Group slaughter somewhere in the region of 350,000 cattle per year across 5 sites. We have 2 sites in England, 1 site in the Republic of Ireland, and 2 sites in Northern Ireland. We have a procurement manager works at each site, procuring the cattle from all local farmers, but we also have agricultural coordinators who sit alongside the procurement managers, ensuring that the standards requirements are in place at farm level to meet our customer needs and requirements. So in terms of our agricultural strategy, we have developed a strategy with 3 pillars. The 3 pillars include animal health, nutrition, environment and genetics. Within the animal health and nutrition, it's basically as it says on the tin, so improving the health performance of our cattle, so ensuring our farmers have the tools that they need to improve the quality, improve the health of their animals on farm, to ensure that the performance is achieved that they are desiring. Around the environment piece, so that's all around our landscape, our grasslands. So our cattle come from local farmers. Our average supplier supplies us with 35 cattle in the year. In fairness, our farmers are relatively small. We have a large number of farmers to manage. So they're mainly focused on their grasslands. So improving grassland management and maximising that resource is one of the most powerful initiatives that we can embrace. And then around the genetics piece, so we have a genetics program within Foyle Food Group that we've established to improve the genetics of the cattle coming through our supply chain. So we are challenged with our Scope 3 emissions. Our cattle, there is huge opportunity with genetics. We want to improve the lifetime performance of our cattle. So we have embraced a program where we supply some semen to our suppliers on a basis where they have supplied us with cattle, and that scheme is really about demonstrating how better genetics deliver for their system, improve the productivity of their system. So it's really a demonstration project, and it has actually grown feet and legs in recent years. So back to the regenerative agriculture piece and where we're coming from. So look, as I was driving in here today, I looked at the landscape and it's green fields. You know, what more should our landscape really look like? We have a beautiful landscape here in Northern Ireland. Regenerative agriculture, to me, is a different thing in Northern Ireland than would be in other parts of the world. But in terms of our strategy, we have embraced some mechanisms within our environmental piece, trying to promote the use of practical solutions that tick the box for regenerative agriculture. So solutions that our farmers can embrace sensibly. So reducing chemical inputs at farm level is a big thing. So every farmer wants to reduce their nitrogen inputs. They want to improve their soil structure, their soil health. So it's really about taking a wee step back in terms of overloading our soils with chemicals and trying to get the environment working a wee bit harder for us as farmers so that we have reduced inputs and improved soil health, improved productivity and profitability. So with this whole journey, we do not want to see a reduction in our productivity. We want to maintain our produce, we want to maintain our output, but we want to try and reduce the impacts potentially that chemical inputs would have.
Brilliant. Thanks, Andrew. I want to leave sufficient time for questions from you guys because we've run short in some of the other sessions. But I want to try and wrap up two questions in one here for the panel, really. In terms of regenerative ag and regenerative as a brand, in terms of it gaining momentum in the consumer's mind, then how do you reflect on this in terms of how it can standardize? Is there a possibility to develop standards around it? This was a question that was posed to a panel at Groundswell last year, I think. Is there potential there to do that? Do you think there's enough traction with the consumer to build that? Reflecting on some of the difficulties with the green module of Red Tractor, there are challenges around this sort of space. So how do you reflect on that question?
Take that one, Peter.
I'll take a first stab at it. But yeah, look, from a GB perspective in terms of Red Tractor, I think that throwing in more paperwork and due diligence in a space that really doesn't want it, I think is very difficult. And no one wants to do more things and actually get nothing out of it, which is very sensible. I think the challenge is ultimately, I think you can measure it, I think you can standardize it, I think all of those are good things, but ultimately what are you getting out of it at the end of it? And I think that's where it's really difficult to, like we touched on earlier around whether it's organic or whether it's free range or whether it's whatever. I think customers think they understand that and they probably have a degree of understanding, but I think in the regen bit, I think there's a lot of work to brand that, to market that, to make it easy for customers to understand. Out of all of this, customers' attention is so short. You want to make it really easy for them to understand, and I think there are opportunities to standardise that. I think that is sensible, but also you don't want to ask questions for the sake of it, and I think the challenge in this space is how do we make it really easy for customers to buy that and have confidence that they're buying it, and they may be paying a premium, but they're going to come back and they feel good about it. They buy it, they feel good about it, and then so I think that's the challenge in that area. I'm not giving many answers here, but I think that's the bit. We're still trying to get our heads around it.
And Neville, you know, we discussed earlier, without wanting to be divisive with competitors, First Milk have made a clear statement in terms of branding themselves as the regenerative co-op. Yeah. So they've made a statement there. How do you feel about that space?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. So First Milk are a GB cooperative, similar to ourselves, similar size of farms, similar farming practices, and they have rebranded themselves as First Milk, the Regen Co-op. I don't see us saying Dale Farm, the Regen Co-op, because I am quite conscious, and Peter mentioned it, there is an aspect here that you could be accused of greenwashing. I think where we're coming from is that aspects of regenerative farming will mingle into our sustainability program, because at the end of the day, we're being asked by our customers to reduce our emissions and to report that, and we have targets to meet on that. And in doing that, we need our farmers to act. And the first place that we need farmers to act is with the soil. And that's why, going back a number of years ago, before this was ever even talked about, we identified that we needed to look at the soil, soil chemistry, soil biology, etc. And that's the place to start from and build up. Because if you get that right and you get your forage quality right, it actually ultimately leads to improved performance, and you're reducing your inputs to produce that litre of milk that then goes on for processing into the various products. So I'm afraid that regenerative farming may cause confusion to the consumer. It'd be okay if it's explained in the context of sustainability, that regenerative farming is an aspect of sustainability. Because within our sustainability program, and I've mentioned the services that we have, we can home in with farmers and help them with energy reduction. That's one aspect. We're looking at feed efficiency, how well they use their feed. We can look at manure management. But when it comes to land management, grassland management, that's really regen from where we're coming from. And I suppose just to add, John, my role within the company is that when we have international buyers coming to Northern Ireland, I take them out on farms. And we've had buyers recently from Europe, and particularly the buyers who come from the southern regions of Europe where it's more arid, okay, so they don't have that temperate climate, or buyers coming from the United States. And when they come on the farm, and it's just like what Andrew said, when we take them on the farms and they see how the farms are managed, they see that our cows get out to grass. So we know from our farmer profiling that 87% of our herds graze. We have a small cohort that don't. But whenever they see that and they see the grazing infrastructure, they see how we rotationally graze around the farm, how we manage our swards, and the fact that well-managed swards, we're only reseeding once every 10 years, so we're not putting the plough in every year, compared to a European system or an American system where you're having to continually till the soil and plough to grow forage, maize, etc. So we're working off a grass-based system. When those buyers come and they get a feel for the system, they see what they're doing, more than once I have had the comment, you guys are operating a regen system. Now, I don't put the words in their mouth, and I'm very cautious about using it because I don't want to be accused of greenwashing. But that's the buyer coming from another region, and we do a lot of work or sell a lot of product, not just into the UK but further afield, across Europe and the Middle East and into the States. And those people that are coming here, they're seeing the landscape, they're seeing how we farm, and that's the conclusion that they're coming to. But I would say that that's part of our sustainability package, and it comes under the land use piece on how we use the land properly and respectfully, in that we're all about trying to maintain output and reduce those inputs as far as possible. And farmers have made great inroads in this, in terms of fertiliser use on farm has fallen over the years. And I think one of the sea changes in Northern Ireland was a number of years ago, 2009, we became a nitrogen vulnerable zone and farmers had to have slurry storage for the winter period, 22 weeks slurry storage. And I think from then, farmers are using their manures better on farm and they're reducing that input of inorganic. But look, you can't rest on your laurels. There's always more to be done, and that's what we're trying to roll out through our programs with our farmers. And ultimately, it's a win-win because you're improving the environment, but you're also improving the bottom line for those guys.
Andrew, on the beef side.
Yeah, so a lot of what I'm probably going to say is already covered, but yeah, look, very much same thinking as the two guys to my right. Probably don't want to be in a position where we're making special circumstances for particular suppliers. We operate as a collective business of a specific group of suppliers. We would like to promote these initiatives and improve as a whole. Look, we have made good work in recent times in regard to our management style of our grasslands, our manure usage, our fertiliser usage. But as Neville says, there's always more work to be done. I suppose from our perspective, where we're coming from and what we're trying to do, we're trying to identify practical solutions for our farmers. So we conduct a lot of farmer-led research within our supply base. We have our own research farm where we conduct numerous trials throughout the year, looking at very innovative technologies and some which some of our farmers can find quite strange, some of the things that we are looking at. But it's all, I suppose, in terms of looking for innovative ways, new ideas of how to reduce chemical inputs, improve productivity, reduce our emissions. But as Neville says, any of the initiatives that we promote as a company must tick the box for environment as well as economical. So we need to have efficiencies there financially as well as environmentally. But like just generally in terms of what we are looking at, reducing our fertiliser use through foliar application, we're introducing things like vermicast or swords. We are trying to promote biological stimulants within our soils, demonstrating how these can be practically implemented to our greater supply chain. So look, from our perspective, we would rather to move our entire supply chain and educate our entire supply chain on these practices going forward.
Brilliant. Thank you, panellists. I'm going to open it out to questions on the floor as John is hurriedly looking for the microphone. Can you please wait until the microphone comes to you so we can all hear you? John, at the front here to start. I'll come to Will and the lady behind you. Thanks.
Could I just ask a clarification from Foyle? You've made a comment that you said that you felt that regeneration in terms of Northern Ireland meant something different to what it meant in other countries. Could you say a bit more about that?
Yeah, well just from my perspective, particularly I was in America last week and I travelled 3,000 miles in 6 days, and I was travelling across dust bowls, plains of land with nothing, and just very inert soils, no production, really lacked organic matter, moisture. But whenever we come back to our landscape, it's green. It just gives you the picture of what our landscape should look like. So how we manage our landscapes, and if we're talking about introducing a standard for regenerative agriculture, I'm not just sure how that actually works whenever you compare us here to someone farming in America. So I'm just, from our perspective, from my perspective, it's just really our landscapes are different. We have a lot more moisture than what a lot of other countries in the world have. So we have different challenges and a different set of opportunities as well.
Could I just come in there, John, just in the back
absolutely,
of that? So look, in terms of, if somebody was to say to me coldly, before this, what's your definition of regen, or where did it start from? It basically started in the arable sector in terms of trying to build organic matter and bring grassland and introduce livestock back into arable rotations, and in doing that reduce the chemical input, etc., etc. Northern Ireland is predominantly a livestock based industry. Early results that are coming through from the Soil Nutrient Health Scheme, which is measuring organic matter. I mean, we have organic matters in our soils here of well over 20% in some cases. If you go to, as Andrea said, some of those pure arable regions, you're down into 2 to 3% organic matter. They have a lot more to do. So it's quite a different set of circumstances comparing one system to the other, really.
Did you want to add anything, Peter? You okay?
No, I think it's all. Yeah, no, I think that there's huge geographical variation. I think the two guys have demonstrated that. But yeah, if you go in different countries, I think where we see if you want to claim it as bad or whatever in terms of low levels of organic matter, I think the variation in other countries will be a lot vaster than it will be here.
Will was next, I think.
Hi. Question for Peter. It'd be great first if you could just clarify your exact role at M&S. And then my question, in terms of kind of introducing regenerative practices in your business and in the supply chain, what are Marks & Spencer's motivations for doing that? Because you spoke about some of your customer demographics. It's not particularly an important issue. So why are those decisions being made, and where are they being made? Is it coming from the top, or is it coming from a sustainability team, or et cetera?
Yeah, no problem at all. So Peter Kennedy, Senior Agricultural Manager at M&S, and it's driven from the top in terms of one, investment probably. We've still got Plan A, which it was about 20 years ago and still is in lorries and all the rest. So that team is still there. You had the head of Plan A speaking at Groundswell, different events last couple of months, and that team is very much expanded. There's a couple of bits to it. One is carbon reporting. But carbon's a big part of it. As a business, we have different commitments that we need to deliver, whether it's scope 1, 2, or 3. And we've got last week at one with the board around where are we on our beef supply chain, dairies, all across all different proteins. So from the top of the business, carbon is probably front and center, I would say. And from a regen perspective around best practice, that is largely as an agricultural team, as a sustainability team. That's our motivation in terms of drive that. And from a supplier's perspective around ensuring that farms are in a better place now than they were previously. But I think the comms bit of that there, it's an interesting one. If you like PR meetings, etc., internally, like journalists ask the questions, and we want to have an answer for it. We don't exactly, and it's probably work in progress around where we want to get to, and the activity in there. But there is that dynamic within the business as well, and that motivation to find solutions.
And the person behind Will, and then I'll come to yourself, and then behind you.
Hi there, Jill Montgomery, Northern Ireland Environment Link. Firstly, to the three panellists, thank you for coming today. It's really good to have engagement with all of the food supply chain. Quite often it's separated out, so thanks for coming. So two questions. The first one is, so many food retailers claim that they are led by what customers want, and that is cheap food. But actually, lots of research is now showing that our citizens want retailers to take much more responsibility in what they offer us. So actually, M&S would be one of the brands that they trust the most. So my first question really to Peter is, how is M&S embracing that level of trust? And how are you investing in it? And the second question is for all three of you, and that's about the inequality across the food supply chain. That is a big issue that we can't ignore. And like him or loathe him, Jeremy Clarkson has helped to raise awareness of this issue. So let's talk a little bit about the perceived or real inequalities across the food supply chains. And you talk about productivity a lot and the importance of that. But true sustainability is also environmentally and socially sustainable. So I'd like your comments on that as well, please.
Peter, start with you.
Yeah, happy to start off on the first point around I was thinking of the second question. The first question was on customers' trust, I'm sorry. So from a customer perspective, you're right. It's a chicken and egg in some ways, because we do say, oh yes, the customer's the driver, and then we maybe trial different products, and then we'll do it in a region or a hub, and see what customers buy, and then we'll roll it out that way. But you're right. From an M&S perspective, we are seen as trusted, and we are trying to lead that direction. And actually, whether it's our dairy supply chain where we're doing feed additives, Bovaer, to reduce our carbon footprint, we've done different activity. And from an M&S perspective, we've invested in that very significantly. And we are taking leaps, very much in the produce world, where actually we're getting into more regen principles and Leaf Plus and different ones. But we are doing a lot of activity, whether it's dairy, milk pool, methane inhibitors, whether it's in the produce world. There's different activities in each supply chain. Poultry is probably feed driven, whether it's on pork, when taking out soy, different ones. There's different activity in each of the different sectors, and I think that is where we're really trying to carry out the activity. The weird bit is that we're doing all these activities, but we're not sure how much we want to shout about it. And we are actually, as a business, worried on that, and we threw it out there about greenwashing, worried about the backlash. So we've done a lot of activity, and we've invested a lot of money on our different supply chains and what we think is the right thing to do. But then we maybe put it in a CSR policy, and we put it onto the website, and the NGOs will pick it up, and some journalists will do it, and we'll put out some press releases, etc. But getting that mass traction back to customers, I think, is a hard one to communicate, and I think we're still working on how we do that most effectively. And actually trying to engage with journalists and different areas that have a good baseline knowledge and you can trust with the message, and they won't get it wrong. And that's where we're probably doing a bit of work as well. Do you want to follow back on that specific bit, or I see you can reach for some mic?
Well, it's good we have the Minister in the room here today. So we're finding out that quite a lot of our stuff is around public education too. So it's good to hear you say that. So sorry, the second question, and then I won't hog anymore.
Yeah, would you like to pick up on the second part of that question?
Yeah, so the second part of your question is around the whole sustainability piece and focusing on, with its three legs to the stool really: environment, social and profitability. And I suppose if you're a farmer at the moment and you're looking at it, you're thinking there's a big focus on environment here coming down the line. But we are very conscious of the social and profitability piece. But they're all actually linked, because as a dairy processor, so we're taking our farmers' milk, we're processing it, and we're selling it on to the end customer. And the end customer has to report their Scope 3 emissions. And so they come to us because we are the supplier of those dairy products, and we have to provide that information. So hence we need the information of our farmers, and we're in the throes of developing further our sustainability program, which does look mostly at the moment in terms of performance on farm and the environment. But what I will say is, and it's at early stages yet, but I have a gut feel that going down this route and focusing on sustainability from that environmental point of view, it will lead to more business. And we have just signed a contract with an American company just recently for cheese. And that company was here and visited, and the negotiations have gone on for 6 or 7 months. But when they came here and they saw what we were doing, and they saw the level of stockmanship, and they saw the animal welfare, and they saw what we were doing in terms of managing our farms and this whole regen piece, it was all in our favour. So to drive more profitability at farm, we need those better paying customers. And if we get those better paying customers, that'll filter through to our farmers, which is going to help the social fabric of our communities, the countryside and our communities. So hence there is a knock-on effect here. And I think over time, we as a cooperative, and we're a small player, we need to be able to tell our story. We need that information from farms to be able to give that family farm message to those larger corporations that we're selling product to resonate them with them, and to help us land those contracts.
Grand. Andrew, would you like to comment on that from the beef sector?
Yeah,
perspective?
no, just similar to Neville here. So, in terms of our challenge, our biggest challenge at the minute with all our customers is reducing Scope 3 emissions. And as I said, our 3 pillars are focused in terms of reducing our Scope 3 emissions. And around the environmental piece, regenerative agricultural practices will have a huge part to play within that. And yes, if we can market ourselves as a more sustainable, a more regenerative agricultural supply chain. We have access to better markets, to better customers, and customers who will pay a higher premium. So that will potentially return better for our suppliers, and again, enhance their bottom line as well.
And just probably to build from a retail really quickly, I think one thing we are really trying to do at the minute from a retailer point of view is, look, we probably don't have a great reputation for whether it's benchmark or tenders and changing suppliers. So what we are doing is longer term contracts. So we're doing a lot of contracts at the minute between 6, 8, 10-year contracts, and actually more contracts back to farm to try and help the sustainability side of that.
Who is next? The person next to you on your left, John. Yeah. There we go.
Hi, thanks for coming and talking to us. It's very interesting about what you're saying, and actually one of the things I'd like you to make a comment about, Andrew, perhaps, is you said that what more do we want but green fields? Well, I do believe, but maybe I'm incorrect, that Northern Ireland is one of the most nature-depleted regions of the United Kingdom. And surely what we should also be measuring as part of our regenerative agriculture is nature as well, not just how green our land is. And I also wanted to ask about slurry. We haven't mentioned slurry.
Yes, so look, biodiversity has a huge part to play. And as I said, that we have made huge steps in recent years in terms of the productivity of our livestock, the productivity of our soils. But yes, potentially there is a lot of scope within this region to improve our biodiversity, and that's where our regenerative agricultural practices do come into play. If we reduce our chemical inputs, improve our soil health, our biodiversity within our soils will help the biodiversity of the nature around us. So yes, it is. We're not saying that it's not a valid requirement of our landscapes. We need biodiversity, yes, but by making the right steps and improving in what we do, reducing our chemical inputs, will potentially yield that. Slurry, and in terms of our slurry, we have got better at managing our slurry. We have a closed period we work with, and that yields us with a set of challenges to manage our slurry through optimum times to improve grass growth. Look, we have slurry, and that is an output of our livestock production. We can't have livestock without slurry, so it's up to us as farmers to be responsible in our management of that, and we can get better, and we have improved significantly in recent times.
I'll just pick up on that last point, just because dairy cows produce slurry also, it's just not beef cattle. But in terms of our farmers, we've found from our surveying our farmers and discussing with our farmers, there's quite a number of them are actually implementing and using biological additives within their slurries. Two reasons for that. One's a practical matter in terms of mixing slurry, and the other is to try and hold more nutrients in that slurry. If you can hold more nutrients in that slurry, and get that out at the right time, you then can further drive down your chemical inputs, which is a win-win on that particular front. Looking forward from where we are now, and having travelled and looking at what's happening in Europe and what's happening even across in GB mainland, I think the next direction to travel is we need to look at how we handle our slurry, and what we do with that slurry, and the value of that slurry, and perhaps, maybe I'm being controversial, but I think we need to be looking first and foremost at slurry separation, and using the components of that slurry better, and putting the components on in the right place. And if you've got too much, move it off the farm to somewhere else that actually requires it. So going forward, you've hit, you touch on a very, it's a hot topic, but I think there's a lot more can be done around that in terms of how we use that. And it is a resource. It's a resource. I mean, mined phosphate levels are in decline across Europe. and we need to use our own organic manures better. And there is the ability and there's the technology out there to do that going forward. I'm going to sound like a farmer, but the big issue is cost and the margin that farmers are working on. And just go back to the question previously about inequality across the food chain. You know, we process close on 1 billion litres of milk per year, and the profitability on that for Dale Farm is in around 3 pence a litre. That's all that's left, you know. So being able to pass more back to farmers for them to be able to do more of these innovations and technologies on farm, it's difficult. The margins are tight. The margins are tight.
Okay. I'll take us up to 3 o'clock, just in case there's another session. The chap next to John there on your left, John, we'll have the last question there.
Yeah, when you talk about regenerative agriculture, you also have to talk about human nutritional health and the benefits that come from that. I'm surprised that nobody has mentioned that. And the second comment that I want to make is that M&S sound quite unsure why they're getting involved with regen agriculture and what's there. And if you're expecting farmers to change their systems based on you not being sure, it's very difficult for the agricultural community to do that. You know, you have to have a clear view. I mean, that question of why you're doing it hasn't been answered. I mean, and it isn't just M&S, but I mean, I see it with Nestle. One of the last conferences I was at, you know, they were all on about regen agriculture, and they closed down one of their a plant which had the closest to an organic supply of milk going into them. And one wonders what is really driving big business? Is it just simply profit?
Happy to jump in?
Yeah, Peter. Yeah.
So from a regen, look, I think if you separate the two out from a sustainability point of view, and if you get into carbon, it's really clear in terms of why we're doing what we're doing. So from a Scope 3 reporting, we made different commitments aligned to the NFU from a 2040 perspective. And look, we've got from the chief exec all the way down, we've got annual reports from a CSR policy, and it's really clear in terms of where we are at the minute, what our interim goals are, and how we're trying to get there. On the bit of carbon, look, our beef and dairy, across agriculture Scope 3, that's about 78% of our emissions. And look, from an agri point of view, from a beef and dairy point of view, that is where we're focusing. Is there a magic bullet there that's suddenly going to transform and, you know, from a take that all away? Definitely not. But that's where we're putting a lot of focus, and we're investing millions as a business in that area across our different proteins. I think the bit that I think the unsure bit, it is how we communicate that to customers. So I think we're 100% committed in this area to carrying out all this activity on carbon. And in terms of regen and principles around best practice on farm, we're rolling that out through whether it's our aligned contracts with our producers, whether it's our integrated beef, whether it's our dairy group, so we've got a lot of contracts specifically with producers where we are remunerating them for their activity. I think the bit that I think is the more grey area is we're doing all this activity, we are committed to doing it, and we're signing long-term contracts and we're putting all this detail within the contracts. But the unsure bit is how do you communicate that to customers, and how do you effectively engage customers in that space around regen principles? I think that's probably the more difficult bit on our side. Hopefully that answers your question.
Peter, I'll take chairman's privilege here and sort of try and flush out the question that was posed on the nature crisis on biodiversity there. There's been a lot of talk around carbon tunnel vision. Are we too focused on carbon? Scope 3 is, pulling that. I've got a question really on carbon. Will we see the results by having this tunnel vision on carbon pulling through biodiversity net gain by focusing on carbon, pulling through the issues of nutrient loading, of river water quality, but just by looking at carbon? Or do we need a broader view of a wider range of natural capital outcomes in order to bring the results that were asked for in the question there? So that's a quick question to you directly, Peter.
No, I think that's it's very observant and definitely true, and apologies if I didn't cover that, but I think we can't be just carbon, it can't be just whether you want to say efficiency, or it can't be on that side, it has to be more broad brush, and whether that's hedgerows, whether it's, and a lot of our farms at the minute, we're doing like Merlin app, we've got the Land app, we're rolling out all of these different apps and trying to understand from a biodiversity point of view, where is our baseline at the minute and how are we improving that, and just to ensure that we are not just being tunnel vision and we're just driving the efficiency side and they're actually improving that farm overall.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you to the three panelists. I'll wrap it up there.